So let's talk about a guy we all think we know, the giant lumberjack, Paul Bunyan. But today, we're going to peel back that flannel shirt and look at what's really going on. Because there's a powerful and honestly kind of unsettling myth hiding just beneath the surface of this classic American tall tale. Yeah, you know this guy, right? The big, cheerful, larger-than-life folk hero with his blue ox babe. This is the version from all those kids' books. The friendly giant whose biggest problem seems to be finding a griddle big enough for his morning pancakes. It's all very harmless, very cozy.
Okay, but what if that whole cozy, familiar image isn't the real story? What if it's actually a kind of mask? One that's been carefully designed to hide something way more profound, and frankly, much more brutal, about the American national project itself.
All right, Section 1, a mask of folklore. We're going to deconstruct this national icon. So, to really get at the truth here, we've got to start by peeling back that comfortable mask and taking a hard look at what's underneath.
And really, it comes down to these two completely different ways of looking at him. On the one hand, you've got the harmless fable, the friendly giant, a symbol of hard work and good old-fashioned ingenuity. But then, there's this other view. Paul Bunyan as an ideological weapon, a symbol of continental domination, ecological violence, and cultural propaganda. It's not just a slightly different interpretation, you see. It's a huge gap between the story we're told and what the story is actually describing.
And that's really the whole point of the mask, isn't it? As the quote says, the myth domesticates the idea of overwhelming force. It takes this massive, continental-scale destruction and frames it as just a bunch of charming little stories. Suddenly, this incredible force isn't just normal, it's heroic. It turns the absolute crushing of the natural world into a simple, praiseworthy achievement.
So that leads us right into our next section, the Colossus of Expansion. We're going to see how Bunyan really becomes the living embodiment of manifest destiny.
I mean, think about it. Paul Bunyan is basically manifest destiny made flesh, or, well, myth. The actual historical reality of westward expansion, it was slow, it was incredibly messy, and it was often really brutal. But the myth of Paul Bunyan, it just cleans all that up. It recasts this whole complicated, violent process as the effortless work of one single, giant, godlike hero.
Let's take one of his most famous feats, for example. The story goes that he created the Grand Canyon just by dragging his axe behind him as he walked. You know, like a complete accident. Just a whimsical, oops, made a canyon kind of thing. But if you look at it through this other lens, as this quote points out, it's not a gentle act of creation, is it? It's a violent scarring of the earth. It's a symbol of a power so huge that it just remakes the world however it wants, with zero regard for what was already there. The Grand Canyon stops being a natural wonder and becomes instead a monument to the sheer force that carved it up. And here's another perfect example, the Great Lakes. The story says they were dug out to be a drinking trough for his ox babe. Just think about that for a second. The largest system of fresh water on the entire planet is reduced to a simple water bowl for a pet.
I mean, this is an act of just pure, godlike arrogance. The story completely reframes an entire ecosystem as nothing more than a utility. It's basically a catastrophic terraforming event, all done for one simple, selfish reason. It's a story that completely endorses the idea of mastering and controlling nature on a scale that's almost impossible to imagine. Okay, so this brings us to Section 3, the American Ide. Because what all this shows is that Paul Bunyan isn't just about historical events, he actually reflects something much deeper, a powerful psychological drive in the American psyche.
So if you think about it in psychological terms, Paul Bunyan is basically the nation's id. He's that primal, unchecked engine of pure expansion. There's no restraint, no thinking about consequences, no foresight at all. His one and only directive is just to do, to build, to grow, to get bigger, no matter what. And this leads to this concept of brutal creation. You can see it here. The ambitious goal, building a new nation, is completely tangled up with the brutal consequence, like raising ancient forests. Conquering the frontier means displacing entire ecosystems. What the myth does so brilliantly is it collapses the distinction between progress and violence. It fuses them together into one single, inseparable act.
And that brings us to our final section, the giant's long shadow. Because the legacy of this myth, well, it casts a long and, you might be surprised, a very relevant shadow over America, even today.
See, Bunyan's legacy isn't just collecting dust in some storybook.
It's more like a cultural blueprint. It's that national impulse to solve problems not with careful thought but with just overwhelming force. It's that mindset that always prioritizes progress over preservation. It's that ambition that isn't troubled by consequences. An ethos that sounds a lot like the modern Silicon Valley mantra to move fast and break things. Paul Bunyan is the friendly, smiling face of continental domination, and that spirit, it's still a really powerful undercurrent in the American psyche.
So, that leaves us with a pretty big question to chew on, doesn't it? Is the tall tale of Paul Bunyan really just a story for kids? Or is it something more, like a recurring, unexamined blueprint for some of our most dangerous national ambitions? Is that relentless drive to dominate, to reshape, and to consume everything in the name of progress, does that spirit still define us today?